Hi, Chris.
Hey Fred, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, man.
Let me turn on my camera. There you go.
Great.
Good to see
Um,
you.
yeah, good to see you. Look forward to these chats again. You're one of the best conversations I always have on this. You perform well every month from the ones we've had in the past.
Well, good. Thanks. Love being here, and there's so much to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, you're just a plethora of knowledge on this. So, what are we going to go over today?
Well, I wanted to talk about, and again, I'll talk whatever you want to discuss. But the whole issue of Guy Banister, New Orleans, and the fact that the conspiracy theorists have made up this fantasy world about Banister, which is non-existent. And it just amazes me that you can open up any conspiracy book and what you read about Guy Banister and 544 Camp Street and David Ferry and Oswald is just not true. I mean, it's just absolutely an incredible situation of where people have made a fantasy world.
So there was like a building, but there were separate entrances, and you could actually access it without even going to e- either one of them, right? Or
Well, no, it was called the Newman Building, and so on one side on Camp Street you had 544 Camp Street.
Mhm.
And if you entered through that entrance, you would go up the stairs, and there was offices. Around the corner on Lafayette Street was an entrance to Guy Banister's private detective agency, which was not connected to 544 Camp Street, even though it was the same building.
So, how did Oswald come about getting this office there or room?
Well, he didn't have an office there, and that's what people like to try to tell you that he had an office and he was
Okay.
associated with Guy Banister. Um, and this all comes from Jim Garrison and his investigation. He first off, let me just back up and just say when he started looking into Guy Banister, and you can see this in his files. I've published this. He put together a list of all the employees who ever worked for Guy Banister. So other private detectives, secretaries, what have you. And he talked to everybody who had ever worked for Guy Banister, and nobody had ever seen Lee Harvey Oswald. Not one person ever saw Oswald there. That's kind of interesting. The only person on the list to have seen Oswald was Delphine Roberts, who did not say this in 1967. She sort of said that in the 1970s after she was paid for an interview by Anthony Summers. So nobody said anything in 1967, and of course nobody came forward in 1963 or 1964. Um, Jack Martin, for instance, who loved to tell stories about David Ferry, never said a word about Ferry being seen with Oswald in 1963 or 64. So all this comes later, and and the fact is, the only connection with Oswald is the fact that on a few Corliss Lamont pamphlets, the case for Cuba, um Oswald stamped it with Fair Play for Cuba Committee, 544 Camp Street. That's all. He did maybe on three or four or five pamphlets. He stamped that. Now, perhaps I think he stamped it because he was looking for an office for the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, and there were offices for rent at 544 Camp Street, and of course Oswald worked at Riley Coffee around the corner, so he probably saw the for rent signs at 544 Camp Street. He considered renting there, and maybe he stamped a few pamphlets, and then came to the realization that he probably couldn't afford to hold on to an office there, and of course he really didn't have much to operate for because he was the only member of his Fair Play for Cuba committee.
Why did Jack Martin have it out for Dave Ferry so much?
Well, that's a good question. So Jack Martin, basically, Ferry was hanging out at Bannister's, and Ferry was also hanging out at Ray Gill's office. And I think at one point, Ferry threw Martin out of the office. Martin was sort of a hanger-oner, who was coming in to use the typewriter and to use the phone, and Ferry threw him out one time, and I think that got Martin really pissed off, and from that point on, he had it in for David Ferry.
So Garrison ties these basically these flyers to Guy Banister.
So yeah, when in fact when Oswald gave out the flyers on Canal Street, and then later at the International Trade Mart, none of those flyers were stamped 544 Camp Street. They were either stamped with Oswald's home address, or they were stamped with his post office box. Not one flyer was stamped with 544 Camp Street. And in fact, when you look at the movie JFK, they show a fake Oswald flyer in that film stamped
Yeah.
544 Camp Street. And the same thing happened in JFK Destiny Betrayed, the new documentary series from James D'Eugenio and Oliver Stone. They also showed a fake Oswald handbill with 544 Camp Street. Those are fake handbills. He never handed one out with 544 Camp Street.
Really?
Yeah. So and you know I've blogged this. You could read I've done 5 blog posts on this, just decisively proving that those are complete fakes, and you could tell because there's several markers on them that show they're fakes. It's really easy to show.
So and in JFK the movie, they show that when Jack Martin's meeting with him at the beginning, it says, Oswald was there and Ferry was there, and then they just put Shaw there. There was never just kind of dropped him in. I mean, there was never nothing tied to him there, no connections. It was just all of a sudden there was just Clay Shaw involved in this, and they never explained how he knew, was involved with Guy Banister.
None at all, and there's there's absolutely no connection between Guy Banister and Clay Shaw, and so that sort of gets glossed over. And of course, they had to sort of make up a connection between Clay Shaw and David Ferry, and then that's when they came up with the Clinton witnesses who supposedly saw them in Clinton, Louisiana, in August of 1963, with Oswald at a core rally to register voters.
Do you think though, because I'm thinking, I mean, when I first watched it as a kid, I'm like, oh, there's the evidence that I witnessed, and as I get older now, I can't remember somebody I seen from last week. Do you think that Garrison, coached these witnesses on what to say to testify against them?
Somebody coached them, or somebody came up with the idea. I think the idea, and I'm going to be writing a very some lengthy articles about this for the 60th anniversary, including a bombshell news item which I can't tell you about. But
Okay.
but here's what I think happened, and I think that there were some people. In fact, there was one funder of Jim Garrison, L.P. Davis, who was an extreme anti-segregationist right winger, who was very unhappy that Garrison was talking about a right wing plot, right, a right wing CIA plot. And I think that they did this whole thing in Clinton to try and show Garrison that it was a left wing communist plot. I mean, to them, all the people working with CORE, the people who were organizing black people to vote, to them, they were all communists. And so I think that the whole idea behind the Clinton witnesses was to try and get Garrison, or convince the world that it was not a right-wing conspiracy, but a left-wing conspiracy.
Oh, that's very interesting. I never thought about that right there. So, how much, or was Garrison, I mean, Guy Bannister, investigated at all in this? Did they look into him, or was it questioned by the FBI?
He was questioned by the FBI after the assassination, but they really didn't ask him that many questions. They really never thought that he was involved in anything. So they sort of asked him a few things, and he didn't say much. They didn't really ask him about Oswald. It's too bad. And he died. I mean, he died in June of 1964. So we don't really know what he would have said or what, later on. But, we have to, Guy Banister, by the time 1963 was rolling around, he was a violent drunk. And he couldn't pay the rent on his on his detective agency at 531 Lafayette. I mean, he was evicted in 1964 for not paying his rent. I mean, he had really deteriorated to being an insignificant drunk. I mean, the conspiracy theorists paint him as this, CIA mastermind who is, this manipulator of people, masterminding with Ferry and Oswald and all these people. He was a drunk who couldn't pay his rent.
So what was the chances? Did he know Oswald in passing, or was this just totally just fabrication?
It's a total. There's no evidence that he knew Lee Harvey Oswald. Even his brother, Bannister's brother, said that the only connection was that Bannister saw Oswald handing out leaflets. That's
So
it.
yeah, because I remember in the movie JFK when he's out there and then the sinister Clay Shaw scene in the background
Yeah.
as he's handing them out, and let's make the link. So the night of the assassination, people's the beating with the pistol, that
Yeah.
was over phone records, right?
Yeah, I mean, basically Martin was using Guy Banister's phone for long distance calls, and so that was the argument, and that's why he was pistol whipped. And you could see the police report, and in fact, Jack Martin told many other people about exactly why this happened. There was no connection with Oswald or the assassination.
In Jim Garris's book, I'm really surprised that it got as far as what it did. If people had checked what he said, because I think in the '60s he called Jack Martin nothing but a drunk, and then by the '80s he was one of the greatest investigators of all time.
Yeah, you could see in some of the, for instance, in the if you know Albo Buff was one of Ferry's young friends. He was the guy who went with Ferry to Texas, to Houston after the assassination. So Bobuff's lawyer taped a conversation with Garrison's investigators in which he was bribed, threatened, and bribed. But even in that conversation, they had some nasty words to say about Jack Martin, but what a sack of shit he was, and you couldn't believe anything he said. So Garrison's people understood quite clearly who Martin was and what he was all about.
So, did he make a phone call after that, trying to link Oswald with Bannister?
Well, no, well, Jack Martin was calling everybody. So after the assassination, he was calling everybody: the FAA, the FBI, the Secret Service, the newspapers, everybody. And he was not talking so much about, well, he was talking about Oswald and Ferry, and he basically claimed that he had seen in Ferry's apartment a similar rifle to the one that Oswald used, and he wondered whether, in fact, Ferry had bought or had told or had taught Oswald how to buy the rifle. So right from the start, he was trying to associate Oswald and Ferry, but he really didn't have anything. He had no information.
Was he just this evil of a man that he would want to implicate, an
Yeah,
innocent man?
he really wanted to. He really wanted to get at Ferry and doing whatever he could, and he really wanted to get Ferry in trouble. Um, and of course, he sort of did, in the sense that Ferry was picked up for questioning after returning from his trip to Texas. But the police, the FBI, and even Garrison's office realized there was nothing to Ferry's trip to Texas.
Was there something in the past that made Martin have this kind of bad blood with against Ferry?
Yeah, well, I think it was the fact that Ferry had thrown Martin out of
Oh,
G. Regio's office,
that's right.
and so that they were friends, and then that happened, and then there was the Martin took it was there was a grudge between them, or at least between Martin and Ferry.
I mean, because that's a major major grudge right there. I mean, implicating somebody in the assassination of a president. Um, that
Yeah,
and I think this right here is really special. I want to talk to you about, because this is the part that gets so no I guess no attention really gets paid to, or it's kind of glossed over because all of a sudden you got Oswald there and then Bannister there, and they're all tied together, but there's nothing tying them together. It's just kind of like you got a bunch of people there, and there's not even 6 degrees of separation.
Yeah, it makes for a great story and it makes for a great fairy tale, no pun intended. But there's really nothing to tie all these people together, and I don't think Ferry knew Oswald, and Oswald didn't know Bannister, although Ferry did know Bannister, of course, because Bannister even helped uh, argue his case before Eastern Airlines to get his reinstatement as a pilot. But there's no evidence they either of them knew Oswald.
I mean, because there you got Bannister, a right wing guy out there, and then there Oswald is a former Marxist or whatever. I mean, it just makes no sense why those two guys would be friends and hanging out together.
Not at all. I mean, they're complete opposites in terms of politics, and the whole idea that Oswald had an office upstairs through Bannister is just completely ridiculous. And I mean, even David Ferry is misunderstood. I mean, one thing about David Ferry, he was certainly a rabid anti-communist, and he hated Castro, but he was very, very much a pro integrationist. He was very much for integration. He was not a racist at all. And so people sometimes misunderstand David Ferry.
Yeah, I remember we talked the last time about him. I think what Garrison called him one of history's most interesting
Yeah, after
characters or something like that.
yeah, after Ferry died, he became really super interesting to Garrison, and of course, Ferry's death allowed Garrison to say anything. He could say anything about David Ferry. Who was going to contradict him? It gave Garrison a lot of freedom to say and do things afterwards.
So, you said you had an article that's a bombshell you couldn't write on right now. I haven't been keeping up with the block here lately. Are you still doing that every day?
I don't do it every day, but I do 2 or 3 or 4 blog posts a week. I'm actually going to the archives next week for a week. I'm going to spend a week
Again.
in Maryland to do some more research and get some more documents. So I'm looking forward to that.
How much time have you actually spent up there in the archives? Because I know every time I talk to you, it seems like you're going back.
Yeah, this will be my 4th trip to the National Archives. I've been to the Library of Congress twice. I've been to Baylor University 3 times to go through the papers of Gus Russo and Dick Russell, and I've been to a variety of other places for other archives.
Have you ever sat down and figured out how much time you've actually spent investigating this case?
Well, a lot of time, and then one of the problems is that at the National Archives in Maryland, where all the JFK assassination records are kept, there's millions of pages that are public, but most of them are not online. So the only way you can get access to a lot of documents are just to go there. I should say they are attempting to digitize everything, which I can't wait till that gets done.
Oh yeah,
But there's millions of records, millions of pages that are just not online, and most of the HSCA stuff is not online anywhere.
really? I didn't know that. Um, I don't know. We talk about this all the time because people still screaming, release the documents. How many actual documents are there left? It's just like a handful, right?
Yeah, what people don't understand about the documents is, first off, all the JFK assassination documents have been released.
Okay.
All of them. There are 4,000 documents that still have some redactions, mostly CIA documents. But everything has been the only thing I should say, the only documents that are completely withheld in full are IRS documents and some grand jury testimony. And those documents will never come out because the IRS documents are exempt from the JFK Assassination Records Act. So that leaves around 4,000 documents, mostly CIA documents, with redactions. But these documents have been released. It's just there's a few redactions, and over time they'll come out. But thousands of documents have been released in the last 3 or 4 years. There's nothing. There's nothing in these redactions.
Well,
They're
it's just
mostly,
always. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
they're mostly names of agents or names of informants or stuff, and some of it's completely boring.
I've just always found it so ridiculous when people, talk about releasing documents. Like, this makes no sense. They're going to get involved. They're going to kill a president, lock all the information away for 75 years, to come back and prove we was involved in a conspiracy. I mean, you would just destroy anything like that. You wouldn't, lock that away.
Yeah, they expect there's going to be a secret document on paper with the plot. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And I should say there's around 40 to 50 documents with redacted social insurance numbers. Now, do I really need to see the social insurance numbers of some people who are still alive? I think they should not be released. I think those documents should stay secret. I mean, that's an invasion of privacy.
Yeah, exactly. So you have Hey, stop. All right, Josh. So you said you had paper coming out. Can't wait to see that. Do you have any books coming up again?
Yeah, well, yeah. So I'm going to do a series of articles about Clinton and what happened in Clinton, Louisiana. So I'm going to sort of time those with the 60th anniversary. And I've got some new information that will be in those articles, and that's going to be a lot of fun. And then my next book is going to be a series of short stories, true stories, true stories about the Garrison investigation. And these will be sort of 8 or 10 stories that didn't make my last book on Garrison, but that are really, really fun little stories that people don't know about, and it's all related to people around Garrison. Richard Case Nagel, Rose Cheramy, Raymond Broshears, that sort of stuff. These are really good stories, but they're all separate stories.
Because you must have spent a lot of time. I mean, how long did it take you to run down these witnesses to find what was,
Well, I think, it's just a matter of, like on the Garrison stuff. I mean, I really started going through Garrison's papers. And as you go through his papers, you start learning. It takes you a while to really understand who's who, and then you start learning about the different stories. And that's when I really realized, going through his papers, just how crazy he was. That he's crazier than people really even know. And then you start thinking, oh my God, there's so many interesting stories. For instance, I'm going to tell the story of Bootsy Gay. Have you heard the story of Bootsy Gay?
No.
So Bootsy Gay was a woman in her 60s who went to Garrison in 1967 or 68, and she said, I G. Ray Gill was my lawyer back in 1963, and I knew David Ferry, who worked for G. Ray Gill. And right after the assassination, I saw on David Ferry's desk a map of Daley Plaza. And I wanted to keep this map, but the secretaries who worked there took it out of my hands and they threw it in the waste bucket. And so she went to Garrison with this story, and he thought it was important, and he investigated it. And of course, the other people who worked in G. Ray Gill's office said it didn't happen. So I wrote this up, and Garrison went to the HSCA, and he told them that you got to investigate Bootsy Gay and the possibility that David Ferry had a map of Daley Plaza right after the assassination. And I went to Joan Mellon's book. She wrote a big book about Garrison. And what really surprised me was that she said that right after the assassination, that Bootsy Gay had written a letter to her congressman in New Orleans about David Ferry. And I thought, oh, I don't have that letter. I really have to get that letter. And I was worried that maybe that would have corroboration for finding a map on David Ferry's desk. And so that letter is in his Congressman Hebert from New Orleans. It's in his papers at Tulane University. So I went to Tulane and I got his papers out, and there was the letter, 13 pages, that Bootsy Gay wrote to him right after the assassination, discussing David Ferry. And I said, wow, what a letter, and this letter, there's not one word in there about finding a map on David Ferry's desk. So there's no contemporaneous support for her later story about finding a map. And I was amazed that Joan Mellon did not mention this in her book, that she does not mention a map.
Now, is she the same one that wrote? Was it Best Destiny Betrayed or something that she tries to defend the Garrison investigation? Was that her?
No, Joan Mellon wrote the book Farewell to Justice.
Oh, Parallel Justice.
Yeah,
Okay.
James Eugenio wrote Destiny Betrayed.
Okay, I got to mix up. But she was a Garrison supporter too,
Yes.
right?
And her
Okay.
book is absolutely amazing because it has every conspiracy story you could ever imagine about Jim Garrison. She believes everyone, every story, and so it's almost like an encyclopedia of conspiracy stories.
Huh. It's amazing that, when I see these posts and questions and, in the forums, people do not afford Clay Shaw the same rights they do Lee Harvey Oswald. He's innocent, innocent, innocent. Here, Shaw actually went to trial and was acquitted, so he is innocent in the eyes of the law. And you, like I said, the most knowledgeable person I've ever met on this case. I thought I knew a lot about it until I ran into you, and you're up here, and I'm like elementary student. I learned so much from you all the time. How does it make you feel when you go in here and you post something on your blog, or like or your book, and like that Dowitz is attacking you all the time. Your book's just copy and paste, anyway, and you put this well written post with information sources, and then the detractors are talking about Litwin stupid, Litwin is crazy, Litwin is. I mean,
Yeah.
how does that make you feel? I mean,
Well, in a certain sense, it makes me laugh because they can't answer the substance of what I write. So they have to attack me, and I mean, James DiEugenio's latest ploy is to say, well, I don't really know who this guy is. He's lied about his past, so I'm not going to answer any of his stuff. And so I just laugh. I mean, but I get this all the time. I get people accusing me of working for the CIA. I get insults all the time. They claim my real name should be Nitwit.
yeah, I
I mean, very clever. I mean, um, but they won't really address the substance of what I write, and that's what I find really, really funny.
yeah, I'm exactly that too. That they've offered nothing to, and I've seen you ask them all the time. Well, post your evidence on it. Post your
Yeah,
evidence.
you take little things like, was there a plot in Chicago against JFK? They say there was a plot. I say, post your evidence. What is the evidence that there was a plot against JFK? There is no evidence, and so they won't answer the question. Or I asked them, what evidence did Jim Garrison have that Clay Shaw was conspiring to kill Kennedy when he was arrested? Answer that question. What evidence did he have? Well, they won't answer that. I mean, again, I can ask question after question. They will not answer. They will not engage, but they'll call me names.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed that all the time, and it's just constantly a name calling, and that's the only thing they know what to do. And I'm like, this. And when you read the post that you have, I mean, it's sourced information. I mean, it's impeccable. I mean, you can't.
Yeah, I'm posting primary documents all the time. It amazes me that I'm posting all these documents from the Garrison investigation. Joe Mellon doesn't post any documents on her website. DiEugenio doesn't post any documents. I'm posting primary documents that nobody else has seen all the time on Garrison on my blog.
I mean, yeah, it's impeachable. I mean, there's no way you can get around that. The stuff um, that you're posting on that, and hopefully, as time goes by, and more and more people no longer believe in this, that people will start to appreciate the work that you've done in this case. Basically, telling Clay Shaw's story, because really, Fred, if it hadn't been with you, he would probably still be in a footnote in history of being guilty in the
Well,
assassination.
it's a shocking thing that this innocent gay man was charged with conspiring to kill Kennedy. I mean, somebody should really make a movie about this. It's such an incredible story, and nobody knows it. I tell people about Clay Shaw all the time. I mean, people don't know it, and it's just that man was victimized twice, once by Garrison and once by Oliver Stone, and it's a shame. He was a really good man who did a lot for the city of New Orleans. He was loved in New Orleans. He had retired to a really nice life of writing plays and restoring properties, and Garrison ruined his life. And I just think it's a horrible story.
And then basically what Stone did later, I remember reading one time that, and Mark Lane, and we know what he's did, that he said that it was tantamount to character assassination what Shaw did, or what Oliver
Well,
Stone did.
Even Lane said he never saw any evidence that Clay Shaw was Clay Bertrand. I wish he had said that in 1967 or 1968. He waited to 1992 to say that. Um,
Yeah, because he said that when they asked him about the verdict, he said, "I believe the jury got it right," or something along those lines.
well, he didn't say that at the time. I mean, the problem is
Right.
it's easy to say that years later. Good for him, but at the time, I mean, Mark Lane actually he went around right after the verdict telling people, "Oh, I spoke to all the jurors, and they all said that Garrison proved a conspiracy, and I'm going to write this in an article." He never wrote that article, and a lot of the jurors told Kirkwood they never spoke to Mark Lane. He was just wrong about that.
Was there true any juror actually said that, or was that just
Yeah,
totally
so I think there
circumvented?
were a few jurors who believed there was a conspiracy, but a lot of jurors said just the opposite. That in fact, Garrison's case was completely non-existent, and that there was nothing to it. Um, Kirkwood spoke to all the jurors, but Mark Lane didn't.
Yeah. I mean, and I guess this starting kind of get off topic here. His whole case was trying to prove a conspiracy and then put Shaw involved in it, like instead of Shaw involved in the conspiracy. That'd be a fair statement.
Well, that's what he charged Shaw with, conspiring to kill Kennedy, and that was his theory. And the problem, I don't think Garrison ever thought it would go to trial. I think he believed that Shaw would either commit suicide or something would happen, that it would never go to trial. And in fact, to his disgrace, it did go to trial, and he was exposed as having nothing.
Dog report. Hey, 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 hey. Took on two dogs or an extra one. This problem. Um, So this has been a good talk. This was one of my most fun interviews with you on it. I think it's probably all the questions I got for you on this. Is there anything that you wanted to add to it that maybe we should know about?
Well, hey, I'm going to be in Dallas for the 60th anniversary, so if anybody's there, I'll be there and love to chat with people. Are you coming for the 60th?
I plan to come 60th. Yeah, I do. I plan right now. Saving money and putting everything back. I just told because Scott's been on me about it, and he's said you got to come, bro. And I was like, okay. I said, but y'all got to understand. On Saturday from 2:30 to 5:30, I will not be anywhere around there because that's when Alabama and Auburn plays. And if you don't know if Alabama is, we do not miss the Alabama
Right.
football. So, I'll be tied up for that moment right there. But I bet that place is going to be. I mean, people are on top of each other for that.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of people there, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of conspiracy theorists who will. Oh, there's Fred Litwin. Okay, let's make fun of him.
Yeah, I didn't realize. It was after one of our chats a while back. And I just did like a Google search, and I had no idea the just actually how famous of the guy you were involved in this. I watched countless YouTube interviews with you and discussions you have had and lectures you was giving on it, and stuff talking about the assassination, and I was very impressed.
No, thank you.
And then you also wrote a book about politics in Canada, right?
Yeah, called Conservative Confidential. So it was basically how I moved from being a left-wing anti-nuclear activist to being a conservative party campaigner in Canada.
Really? But I'm guessing conservatism in Canada is a lot different than what the United States is.
It's a lot different. It's very, very different in Canada than the United States. And our Conservative Party, of course, is very, very different from the Republican Party.
Yeah, I would like to move to have a chat like that one day, just to compare and contrast like what it's like, because our Republican Party, and I'm sorry to get off topic here, but I can edit this, but our Republican Party today and our Democrat Party too, they've started going so far into the left and right extremists that there's no middle ground here anymore.
Yeah, it's a real problem, but it's a topic for another time. So we could have a big discussion on this because it's a very, very big topic. But I'll bring a copy of my book to Dallas if you come, and I'll give you a free copy.
Oh, I love that, Brad. I appreciate that.
So that's an incentive for you to come.
All right. Well, enjoy talking to you, Fred, and thanks for this. And let's do this again real soon.
Okay, yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks,
Take
man.
care.
Bye bye.
Bye.